Hello, welcome to Rails Around York. My name is Larry Keller. We're at the Rockhill Trolley Museum today. It's 1989 Memorial Day, and we're going to view some of the cars as well as see the restoration of car 163, the progress that has been made up on it so far. And we're going to see some of the trolleys run and probably ride some of the trolleys. Hope you enjoy the program.
It's called a journal box, and in there is the end of the axle and a brass bearing, which is over there on the tie drying off. We just cleaned it. And what we're doing is we're taking all the old oily packing out of here, and we're going to put new packing in, which in today's world is not the old wool waste. It's an oil-soaked sponge, you might say, that keeps oil up on the bearing and on the axle and so forth. And we've gotten all the old waste out. It's in that can there. And we've got a lot of water which got in the box here somewhere or other to get out of here. And then when we get that out and clean the box out, then we'll put the new packing in. The new packing works a lot better than the old stuff does. That's why we use it. This is the journal brass, or the journal bearing as it's called. It's a bronze casting, and it has a Babbitt metal liner, which is a bearing metal. It's very smooth. There has to always be a film of oil between here and the axle itself. Otherwise the bearing runs hot and the Babbitt starts to melt.
Music. I live in Lower New York State, a little town called Rockhill, and I'm restoring this 1936 Philadelphia subway car here. What I'm trying to do now, especially in the warmer weather, is get the exterior all scraped down and painted using a wire cup wheel and a propane torch. What I've done so far is rewire the car so that it'll run off of overhead wire. It originally had a third rail current pickup, and clean up the inside so that it's in operating condition. I hope in about 2 years or so to have the thing fully restored to the point where we can use it on our line.
We have been watching a lot of trolleys run. Well, right now we're in the shop and we're looking at car 163. That's the York Trolley from the York Railways Company.
As you can see, it is currently under restoration in the museum shops. It has no seats. The seats are being made, and we'll see the seats a little bit later on as we get into this program.
Salomon here. We're inside York Railways 163. What we're doing today is we've just got done laying the linoleum floor. Right now we're putting the trim pieces around the edges here. These are the floor hatches, and they make it accessible to get down to the motor if there's a problem with the motors that operate the car. Okay, we're looking at the control system, the York Railways 163. Right here is the controller, which the operator uses to move the car. The ignition key, like you have in your automobile, you need an ignition key to start the car. Forward or reverse. Turning the controller hand lets the power go down through the car to start it up at an even, slow speed. You can notice all the fingers here, they contact with the brass copper bushings to help power the car. The 600 volts actually goes through there. To stop the car, we use the air brake right over here. This is the air brake handle to stop the car. In case your air brake fails, you have the backup system, which is your hand brake. Turning the wheel applies the brake to the wheel of the car, which slows the car down and stops it eventually. On the floor, you have your motorman's bell. Just installed this spring.
My name's Dave Brightbill, and I'm a volunteer here at the Trolley Museum. And in order to complete our York car, we have to have seats for it. We suffered an unfortunate incident this past February. We had all the seats prepared, ready for installation, and the fellow that was working on them, his home burned down to the ground. He was a member here. In order then to start over again, we had to get another seat out of the collection that we've had in storage and copy it, and this is what we've started here. This is the very first seat, and how we started, we made a new frame. This is oak, and we got our springs together out of other seats that we salvaged from Johnstown Transit, and by putting all this together like that, the next step would be to put the spring steel across the top. After that, there's webbing that we stapled down to give the contour. You'll see we'll do this one, and it gives the nice contour. After that process is done, we have canvas, a big sheet of canvas, and that gets covered over the entire top, tacked to the side. After we're done putting the canvas on, we have this is carpet underlayment. You can get it at your fine carpet stores. And that goes down for a cushion and also to keep the staples and screws and the like from popping up through. Somewhat soft. It's synthetic horsehair. The original was horsehair. After that is done, we have brand new rattan. This is what's called rattan. We discussed this earlier. It was wove for us in China, and it's brand new. And you see it's wove on the diagonal, which is very typical, and it's called railroad weave. This was used by all the railroads and trolley companies, and York as well, of course. And we purchased enough of this. This was very costly. This is roughly, for the amount of seats we'll have in this car, it was $1,500 just for this material. And we'll put that on. You can see it there. And that will be the final covering for a bottom. This is just the bottom, not the back. At this point, we haven't even looked at how the backs will go together. Of course, we're working towards a deadline, which we all know of, September 16th, which is coming quickly.
We've just seen car 163 with its interior lights turned on and the headlight and the destination sign lit up for us.
We are now on the York Trolley, and we're being pulled out to the museum's main line. Here you can see car 163 in the sunlight, presenting car 163 of York Railways Company. It was last run February 4th, 1939 in York County.
Oh, I bet it's exciting.
Let's go for a ride on the York Trolley as Warren Hamilton operates the controls. He's also from York County.
We got a hot rod.
Railroad yards are not playgrounds. I know. I worked summers for the railroad. My grandfather and great-grandfather were railroad men. We've seen people hurt and people killed, young people, because they didn't listen to this advice. Stay off the tracks and out of railroad yards. Playing around trains is playing with your life.
Trolley Museum, Saturday, September 16th, 1989. Rockhill Trolley Museum is located in Orbisonia, Pennsylvania, and behind me is car 163 from the York Railway System. This car last ran 50 years ago in York, Pennsylvania, and we're here today to see the dedication ceremonies and also the first running for the public today on Saturday, September 16th. Stay tuned. Thank you.
Front of York Railways 163, and standing beside me is Mr. Warren Hamilton of York. Now, Ham, would you please tell us a little bit about how you got involved with trolleys as a youngster?
Well, when I was a youngster, my father worked for the York Railways, and I was right around the car barn in York for years. And after the cars were taken off, why, they had some of these old car bodies sitting around York County. And I became a member here at Railways to yesterday, and I thought it would be wonderful if we could get a York car, such as is behind us here, try to restore it and put it into operation.
As you can see, it's kind of an orange and cream color. Ham, is that actually original colors?
Well, the original color when it was built by the J.G. Brill Company in Philadelphia in 1924 was green with gold leaf lettering. But back around 1928, York changed all of their cars from green to orange colored. So we figured when we restored this car, if we would make it green, a person would have to be somewhere around 90 years old to really remember a whole lot about the green cars. So this is exactly the way the car looked when it went out of service in February 4th, 1939. This is the color.
1939?
Well, when they took the trolleys off and converted to bus, many of these cars, I would say at least 25 or 30, were sold for summer cottages, sheds, various things out in the country. I believe there was one or two went for diners. And this car was up along the Conewaga Creek. It was owned by a Mrs. Roy Shirey and her sister, Mrs. Clifford Mrs. Clifford Amig. And I used to go up there and talk to them, and after the flood of 1972, the car didn't serve a useful purpose for them as a summer cottage, so they gave us the car, which we're very, very grateful to Mrs. Shirey and her sister, Mrs. Amig. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the car here.
The car has taken the last 17 years to finish, and I understand the car was nothing more than a shell. Where did all the extra parts for the car, for example, the wheels and the seats and so forth?
Well, the wheel assemblies and everything under the car we scrounged up from various car barns down through the years. Fellas, when Johnstown, for instance, closed down, and a few friends around the Philadelphia area was able to get us parts for the car. The trucks themselves came from Japan. Now, they're not Japanese trucks because they were built by the J.G. Brill Company in Philadelphia at approximately the same time that Brill built these cars for York. So in order to get the exact type trucks, with the trucks I'm referring to the wheel assemblies back here, we contacted a company in Japan and made arrangements, and they very graciously sold us some trucks, and that's how the trucks got here. Now the trucks, they did us a real great favor because they even refurbished the trucks and shipped them over here in crates. But by the time we got them here, the shipping expense was about $5,000 have them shipped across the Pacific, down through the canal, up the Atlantic to Philadelphia, and from Philadelphia to Allentown and out here.
I see.
Other things that we got from the car, actually up along the Conewaga Creek there in York, there was another car body, car number 326. Now there was a Mrs. Sandy Allison who, she very graciously donated their car to us too, but we were already in the process of trying to restore this car, so we used her car for spare parts. And actually there are a lot of spare parts off of car number 326 that are now on this car. As I look inside, I can see various things. Otherwise, we'd have had to go out and completely fabricate everything from new.
So essentially it's taken two cars to rebuild this car into one whole trolley.
With me is Wilbur Leach. You were a motorman for the York Railways, weren't you?
Yeah.
How many years did you work for the company?
21 years on the streetcar, and 22 for the bus company.
You ran car 163, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, I did.
Can you tell us something about your experiences in car 163?
Well, in other words, it was enjoyment. I enjoyed working on it.
Talking to Ferris Little, and he used to work for the Edison Power Company, and his dad also worked for the York Railways Company.
Yeah, my dad started with the railway company in 1904. He worked with them until 1906, and then he went to California. Came back in 1908 and worked till trolleys went off in 39, and then he ran the buses to 1946.
There were many speakers for the dedication. Among them was a representative from the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission, the York Chamber of Commerce, the executive director of the York Area Transportation Authority, and Mr. Donald Murphy from the York City Council.
Ownership from its diverse industrial base. That work ethic was and is reflected in its public transportation. The pride of the employees of York Railways, predecessor organization to the York Area Transportation Authority, in their trolleys and the right-of-way was evident to the end of streetcar service in 1939. One of those trolleys, 1924 Brill Curbside, number 163, escaped the scrap heap by continued existence as a summer cottage until Railways to Yesterday, Inc. removed it from the York County to Huntington County. The superb maintenance that 163 enjoyed as a trolley and summer cottage enabled the RTY volunteers to return this unique streetcar to as close to original operating condition as possible 50 years after the cessation of streetcar service is a testimony to the dedication and craftsmanship of the citizens of York and the RTY members. Now, therefore, I, William J. House, Mayor of the City of York, Pennsylvania, do hereby publish and declare September 16, 1989, to be York Transit Heritage Day, celebrating the rebirth of the York Railways number 163 and the role the workers of York and the RTY members play in this trolley preservation and restoration. Given under my hand and the seal of the City of York, the 16th day of September in the year of our Lord 1989, William J. House, Mayor. And I convey from the Mayor to you, I'm sorry I couldn't be here. Congratulations on everything that's been done, and this proclamation is for you. Thank you.
Car 163 was run through a banner for the dedication. What does it feel like to be riding your car 163?
Well, this has been an exciting day. And everything, all of these workers certainly did a wonderful job.
Since we couldn't find those things, we thought instead we present you with this key, 24 karat.
RTY members did a commendable job on restoring this car, considering they took it from a cabin back to an operating car with virtually no parts original left on it. It's one of the few that's been done in this country, and the first by this organization, and the first one in Pennsylvania that's in the trolley museums that have done such a fine piece of work.
Used to live in. Okay.
I'm surprised that I got to ride on this car again. When we came up here when they were first working on it, and they had so much trouble, I never thought I'd be able to ride on. Thank God they spared me and I could get on it again.
I just want to say it looks a lot different from when we used to sleep in it.
You okay now? Okay.
Brother's done, really?
There you go.
There.
13 ahead.
Mr. Leach, did you ever think you'd be riding the York Trolley again?
Never thought it, never thought it.
How do you feel at this moment?
Wonderful, wonderful. I sure feel wonderful. Yeah, it's taking you back.
Yeah,
You
brings
bet.
back lots of happy memories.
Lots of them, a lot of them. And I really am enjoying it.
Did 50 years for this, and it's just great. And I wish we were back on the streets of York again.
Yeah, here we are aboard the 163, the York Railways Company. It's the inaugural trip. Cars filled with various and sundry dignitaries, not only from York, but former employees, the incorporating members of our museum, as well as Warren Hamilton at the controls, whose father at one time ran this car. I'm the acting conductor on this trip, and coming out to the end of the line for a movie stop, and then we'll head back into Meadow Street to pick up more happy tourists.
Good to see how the heat works with all the glass here.
Well, you'd
be surprised
with electric heat why it gets good and toasty.
Mr. Bueller here and I are the co-founders of the organization. He's member number 1 and I'm member number 2. And it's been a long haul here to get the car running, but we're both glad it's in service and operational, and I think everybody else is happy with it here too.
Like I said before, it's amazing what a group of volunteers can do when they put their minds to accomplishing something like this. And when we first got this car, we looked at it and it didn't look too promising actually. But once we analyzed it, it turned out to be one of the best steel bodies we had in the collection. And we're certainly glad that we succeeded in getting it to run again. Some museums said that we'd never get the thing together, but we fooled them.
Rails of yesterday ticket while watching the program as advertised on TV. I was watching for several months and I enjoy all of it.
It's been a very interesting day up here riding the cars and walking out in the line photographing it, and it's hard to believe that this car has gotten to this condition after all these years and haven't been through a flood and in disuse for so long.
My name's Bernie Houck, and I've come up from York to see the dedication of the York Trolley. And I think they did a real beautiful job restoring it.
I'm Frances Houck. I love to ride this here. It's really nice.
Here's the sower, Michael Guido of Meta, Georgia, with a seed for the garden of your heart.
The express train to Manchester, England left the station on time, but it stopped a mile down the track. The engine wasn't coupled onto the cars. Your faith is like that coupling that links the cars to the engine. It's not the coupling that pulls the cars, but the engine. And it's not your faith that saves, but the Christ in whom your faith is placed. Everyone has faith, but not everyone has faith in Christ. He's absolutely necessary and positively sufficient for salvation. So have faith in Christ the Lord.
A seed from the sower has originated from the studios of the Guido Evangelistic Association, Meta, Georgia.
1880s, and York is a small but growing city. Many streets are unpaved. Merchant carts and wagons lumber through the streets of town, raising dust in dry weather or wallowing in deep mud when it is wet. Enterprising persons realize that railways can be adapted to city use, and now in 1896, street railway construction begins. Cars drawn by horses now lumber up and down the rails laid in the center of the street. Mud is no longer a trap for wheels, and people can live farther from the center of town, yet still have convenient transportation to shops and to offices. York is becoming a modern city. Joining many other United States cities, the horse car lines of York become longer. People can ride cars on South George in 1888 and North George in 1890. Meanwhile, several persons are trying to develop dependable electric motors for use in the cars. Scranton, Pennsylvania had a system in the late 1880s. York joined the growing ranks of cities with electric streetcar lines in 1892. It is now 1894, and you may ride cars on South Queen Street and Princess Street, as well as the lines already built. A line is built out Market Street to Richland, and then out Richland to Highland Park. On a warm summer day, the family can take the open-air electric trolley out Richland Avenue to Highland Park to enjoy a picnic. The central square of York is a meeting place for the new electric cars. Many people now take the streetcars to work and to go home in the afternoon. Electric streetcars make it easy to ride down East Market Street. They leave no mess in the streets the way horses do, which helps keep York a clean city. Electric streetcars eventually had electric heaters, too, making the ride much warmer than a horse-drawn carriage. The year is 1896, and the street railway system of York now has 11 miles of track serving the city. Early postcard views of York, such as those you've been seeing, were one way for a city to show off its modern appearance and its modern transportation system. Note the Hotel Yorktown at the left. Places such as the Colonial European Hotel were a picture postcard invitation to visit the White Rose City. The electric trolley system employed many people in this area. This employee is Eli Eisenhower, shown here in his uniform. The stars and bars you see on his sleeve represent the years of service he has given to the streetcars. This is the main office building for Edison Light and Power, as well as for York Railways. The location is 27 West Market Street. Many power companies trace their beginnings to a trolley car company. The trolleys often brought electricity to town, and electricity in homes soon followed. The first floor was a waiting room for patrons of the trolley cars. Clayton Coons, motorman, polishes his shoes in the crew room at the car barn on Pennsylvania Avenue and Hartley Street before his tour of duty begins. Car 160 rolls through the streets of York in 1913. A two-man crew is assigned to this car. The motorman runs the car, and the conductor, a Mr. Charles Quickle, collects the fares from the passengers. Notice the sign behind the motorman advertising the York Fair. York Fair Week is always especially busy for the streetcar lines. This car was built around 1900. It has 44 seats, and the location is Cold Springs Park on the line up to York Haven. The trolley lines have reached far out of the city. Cold Springs Park is one of 3 parks owned by the York Railways system. It is a popular destination on a hot summer day. Open cars such as 109 often carry picnickers to one of the 3 parks in the summertime. The early 1900s are a period of expansion for the York streetcar system. In 1901, York County Traction takes over the lines, and service is extended to Dallastown and Red Lion. This is East Market and South Queen. New cars arrive in York, such as car 313. This car was shipped on board a Pennsylvania Railroad flat car. In 1904, trolleys first enter Wrightsville from York. Here we are at the Stony Brook Crossing on the Wrightsville line. In 1905, College Avenue, Prospect Street, Linden Avenue, West York Avenue, which is now called Roosevelt, and Penn Street all have streetcar lines. In 1907, the York Railways Company absorbs all existing lines. The system operates 67 cars on 60 miles of track, and by 1908, tracks run all the way to the square in Hanover, where there is a connection with the Hanover and McSherrystown. Suburban traffic is heavy as people decide to live farther from Center City, York. Here we have passengers boarding in Hanover, the year 1909. Between York and Hanover are several bridges. Just outside Hanover, one bridge crosses a main line railroad. Trolley lines often found it convenient and safer to build a bridge over a main line railroad. This resulted in fewer accidents at the grade crossings. Here we are crossing the Pennsylvania Railroad close to Woodbury Station on a bridge between West York and Spring Grove. In the days before paved roads, the suburban lines were the best way to travel in York County. Conewago Creek required a bridge on the line up to York Haven. Here we have a work crew pausing to have its picture taken on the bridge over the Conewago Creek. Work crews had the job to keep the cars and the rails in good shape. To help them with the work, many cars were built or rebuilt for non-passenger reasons. This picture is dated 1933 while the Lincoln Highway is being rebuilt east of York. This former passenger car was rebuilt after the Great War. To you youngsters, the Great War is commonly called World War I. The car is used by crews whose job is to bond the rails. The bonding ensures a good electrical circuit for the electric trolley cars. This is a crane car. It is used to load rails and ties onto work cars so track maintenance and repair can be carried out by the work crews. This is a line car. It is used to carry the tools for maintenance and repair of the overhead trolley wire. Crews stood right on the platform on the roof of the car to do this work on the overhead wire. This car had two uses. Its first use was for hauling stone for the roadbed. Stone between the wooden ties helps the rails stay firmly in place. And then when the car is loaded with stone in the wintertime, it was a good heavy car for plowing snow. This former passenger car carries sand. Sand is used on slippery rail in wet weather or when there were leaves on the rails. Autumn leaves could make the rails very slippery and the sand reduced this danger. York Railways even had a car used to carry picnic supplies to one of the three parks owned by the streetcar lines. The streetcar system also had one car with no motors. It is a trailer car which is attached to another trolley car and it carries many people. This type of car is known as a Linden Avenue car. Car 101 was built after the Great War. Car 162 was built in 1924 as a green car with genuine gold leaf trim. These three cars are at the square in York and were built successive decades apart. The center car in 1911, the car on the left in 1920, and the car on the right in 1930. Still at the square, car number 164 is a Brill car built in Philadelphia in 1930. It is one of the last three cars ordered by York Railways. Behind this East York car is Bear's Department Store, which was later sold to Zollinger's Department Store of Allentown, Pennsylvania. This car operated from the square out around York on the Princess Street Loop Line. The funny little building to the right of car 162 is a dispatcher's shanty. The dispatcher's job is to keep track of the trolley cars and to send them on their way. On North George Street, the trolleys crossed a bridge over Codorus Creek. Note the large advertising sign left of the bridge. Milk was often fetched by trolley car to be used here at the York Sanitary Dairy. Also on the right side of the picture, please notice the Western Maryland Railroad steam engine. On South George Street, trolleys have increasingly heavy traffic to deal with. The automobile, you see, is becoming popular. In 1933, heavy traffic problems were non-existent this particular day. This is the August flood of 1933 on North George Street, looking north from the State Armory. It's rather hard for a trolley to run in high water near North George and Jefferson Avenue. Of course, no one is out riding anyway. This is car number 119. The car was stranded here when the power shut down not long before the floodwaters rose. Ice and snow in winter caused problems as well for the trolleys. This car has derailed and lies across the street. The spot, we believe, is Dallastown. The streetcar lines constantly encourage people to ride the trolleys and to leave their autos at home. York Railways even helps the Red Cross with its membership drives. This picture is dated 1937, but the car was built 21 years earlier in 1916. The streetcars tended to last a few years longer than an automobile does today. This car is at the end of the West King Street line in York, but the interurban cars to Hanover continue beyond this point. The interurban cars to Hanover were fast and comfortable to ride. This is one of the first cars used on the Hanover line. The sign on the front of car 161 tells of a Jesse James film showing at the York Theater on East Market Street. And here in East York, the Lincoln Highway is in good condition. The Lincoln Highway Garage is a sign of the future, for Americans have definitely fallen in love with the automobile. Car 102 is at the corner of Princess and Richland, and that is the Hartley School behind the streetcar. More and more automobiles are appearing on the streets of York. The man is Earl Quickle, who took many pictures of York railways. He is the son of Charles Quickle, the conductor we saw earlier. Here we are on West Market, close to Diamond Street. This 6-year-old streetcar is on West Market in 1936. In 1937, car 164 is on East Market Street at the New York Wire Cloth Company. We have returned to Bear's Department Store downtown. In winter, some trolleys carried a small snowplow. A view of the square in York shows several things related to streetcar service. The trolley has a white notice in its window announcing the end of streetcar service effective February 4th, 1939. Behind the streetcar is the little dispatcher's shanty we have seen before. Off to the left is a bus. The buses will completely replace electric streetcars February 5th, 1939.
Ray Miller drove down this road on the way home from work for 27 years. Last time Ray crossed these tracks, he wasn't thinking about trains. Don't make the railroad track your finish line. This life-saving message is brought to you by Operation Lifesaver and this station.
York was a favorite place for trolley fans to gather. Before trolley service ended, several fan trips toured the York railway system. On one trip, open car number 401, seen here, toured the square. The period between the World Wars saw the peak and decline of York railways. The motorman on this car is Dave Carter. In 1918, there were 85 miles of track in the system, about 26 of them in the city of York alone. Here, the trolley fans are on Hartley Street in front of the car barn. 1923 was the peak year of passenger business, with almost 11 million passengers riding York railways. This car barn is now the home of Capital Screw and Nut at Pennsylvania Avenue and Hartley Street. Inside, the shop building and overhead crane made trolley maintenance much easier. On the Windsor line, the fan trip stops for pictures, and 3 crew members can be identified. On the far left, leaning out the door, is Harry Ryder. On the ground is Dave Carter. And in the front of this car, number 402, is Harris Lichty with his hand on the railing. In 1937, one photographer took this picture near Spry. The car is bound for York on the Windsor line. Another fan trip took a ride out the Hanover line with car number 325. Here, the rails cross a highway to the left of the trolley. We believe this is South George Street, beyond the York Hospital. A final fan trip was run on January 29, 1939, the last Sunday before the streetcars stopped running. Car 327 took the fans out to Red Lion in Windsor. Here we are between York and Dallastown. This is Bittersville, the very end of the Windsor line. The Great Depression was a bitter time for many, and York Railways also suffered. Fewer people rode the cars. In 1932, the Dover line and the York Haven line were abandoned. The line to Wrightsville quit in 1933, and the whole system finally shut down in 1939. We have followed the street railways of York from beginning through boom to bust. Old streetcars were sold to be used as homes, cabins, and for storage, and so ended the trolley era in York, Pennsylvania. York streetcars lasted for around a half a century. Many of the cars survived the boom-to-bust era of York railways. One car began life as number 500, seen here, a sleek high-speed car on the line to Hanover. Car 500 was later renumbered to 09. It usually ran on good track. York Railways had a good reputation and a good maintenance program. Car 500 as 09 also carried a snowplow in the winter. Car 500 as 09 also hauled freight. It often carried milk to one of the milk plants. And here is Car 500 as it looked in 1986. Many old trolley bodies were purchased and used as homes during the Depression era. Car 163 of York Railways is shown here at the end of the West King Street line. This car has been preserved and is currently being rebuilt at the Rockhill Trolley Museum. The Rockhill Trolley Museum has a restoration shop and track on which to run this car. In 1939, Car 163 faced retirement, either in a scrapyard or as a home. The streetcar survived as a cabin in Strinestown, north of York, until 1972 when the Agnes flood hit. Mrs. Rose Shirey and her family, the owners of the car, gave us the old streetcar, and the volunteer crews pictured here prepared the streetcar for the move to the Rockhill Trolley Museum. The cabin was removed from around car number 163, and the car would no longer be a home, a vacation home for the Shirey family. The inside was completely cleared. The museum found exactly the right pairs of wheel sets to use underneath the York trolley that was to be brought back out of retirement. The wheels were exactly like the originals. They had to be brought back from Japan at a cost of about $8,000. At the museum, workers jacked up the car and placed the wheels underneath. Then they carefully lowered the car onto its new wheel sets. The car ran briefly in the early 1970s, almost 35 years after it retired from service in 1939. As you can see, the car is not in pristine condition, even though it does run. Over the next 15 years, much work was invested in the future of York Railways number 163. New air systems had to be installed for the brakes and the whistles. The wooden ends needed a complete rebuilding. In 1983, the volunteers of the Rockhill Trolley Museum proudly pulled number 163 into a brand new restoration shop building. Work then began in earnest as the volunteers donated many weekends of time. If you haven't done work like this, it is hard to imagine the amount of time needed to replace the curved roof of a trolley car. Many persons and many skills are needed to fit the wood to the proper curves. This is Ben Rohrbeck, the author of the book on the York trolleys. Hours, days, even weeks of vacation time are given by our small but dedicated crew of volunteers. Gradually, the time and effort begin to show results. Here, a new roof is on the car, but the old wooden floor has been torn out of the car. It almost looks worse than when we started. The old paint and rust are ground off the metal sides. And old paint must be removed from around each of the several hundred rivets on the car body. On the left, Warren Hamilton, a resident of York, he has been the prime mover behind the project of restoring this trolley car. Now the wooden ends have been rebuilt. 2 coats of primer paint are applied over the metal car body. Here is one volunteer in front of the York streetcar. He is holding wooden roof pieces, which had to be especially made. And now he's installing those pieces on the roof of the car. Trim pieces such as trolley rope catchers and headlights are carefully cleaned, repainted, and installed. The trolley rope catcher on the right was made in York. It was made by the Earl Company, who shipped trolley retrievers and rope catchers all over the world. The interior wiring of the car needs a complete overhaul. The new ceiling of the car is prepared for painting. And how nice it looks when it's finished. Painting the interior is a very messy job because we use spray paint. But it sparkles when it's finished, and one more step toward full restoration is complete. Warren Hamilton of York is the first person to move the car out of the shop building. He stands at the controls behind the window. The car is no longer a retired hulk, but 163 is far from complete. The roof is finished, as you can see here. Painting the trim of the car is a very careful process. Masking the entire car body for spray painting is a monumental job. During the week after Labor Day of 1988, the paint crew sprayed 3 coats of a high-gloss orange over the carefully masked body of York Railway's 163. When the paint was dry, the tape was carefully removed. Several of our few dedicated volunteers are all willing to lend a hand. A comparison of the original color with the brand new paint shows a very close match. And a beautiful car is the result.
We're sitting in car 163. The day's activities are all finished at the inauguration ceremonies of this car. We hope you enjoyed watching some of the activities that went on at the Rockhill Trolley Museum in connection with this car. Come out and ride it sometime.
Thank you for watching Rails Around York. Let WRCT know you saw this program. Call 843-7722.
Good night.
Ray Miller drove down this road on the way home from work for 27 years. Last time Ray crossed these tracks, he wasn't thinking about trains. Don't make the railroad track your finish line.
This life-saving message is brought to you by Operation Lifesaver and this station.